Hi everyone, I'm Giovanni Santamaria. I'm Associate Professor and Department Chair at the School of Architecture and Design at the New York Tech. And on behalf of the Dean, Maria Perbellini, I would like to welcome our guest, Chris Sharples, tonight, our students, faculty, and friends, for the first of this event for the spring, the series of lecture events for the spring 2022. I would like also to thank our endowed chair, Professor Alessandro Melis, also chair of the lecture and event committee for the School of Architecture and Design, and all the members of the committee for the great work in putting together such an interesting program from this spring involving prestigious guests, national and international, such as the one tonight, and to our conversation, both from academic and professional point of view. So I would like to wish to all of you a great evening with us. And now I will leave the floor to Alessandro, who will share with us more detail about this lecture and events, the Spring 2022 program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Giovanni. I'm very excited and honored to start this Spring 2022 lecture series at the School of Architecture and Design at New York Institute of Technologies. Through the event that we have today with our guest, Chris Sharples from Shop Architects. And I'm particularly excited because, as I said, our topic this year is communities, and for us it's really important to start a discussion with architects who have defined a new way to do architecture through applied research. So this is for us particularly relevant to see how architecture can become a contribution to the quality of life of our communities, especially through placemaking and placekeeping. I also would like to take the chance then of course, to thank our guest today, and also to thank Wojciech Octaviec, our colleague, New York Institute of Technology, who has generously organized and coordinated this event, and is going to curate and moderate the event today. Also to thank Dustin White, who has collaborated to this organization. So I would like to leave the stage to Wojciech to present in more detail our guests and to welcome our guests through this inaugural lecture. Thank you very much, Wojciech, also on behalf of the lecture and event committee.
Good evening. My name is Wojciech Octaviec, and I'm faculty member of the School of Architecture and Design. And first of all, I also would like to thank to the New York Institute of Technology for support and encouragement in organizing this event. So the thanks goes to our Dean, Maria Perbellini, of course, to our chair, Giovanni Santamaria, who is with us today, co-chair Dustin White, who organized the event with me, and of course, Alessandro Melis, and all members of the lecture and the event committee. And special thanks to Susan Sternberg for her guidance, personal guidance for me, and help giving in preparation event information. It is my great pleasure to introduce Christopher Sharples, one of the founding principals of Shop Architects, and thank him for his generosity in sharing Shop's work tonight. I've been knowing Christopher for 30 years. I met him in 1993 in the Washington, D.C. on the event which was called the International Forum of Young Architects. But Chris at the time was just graduated, and he told me his story. At the time, he received Bachelor of History and Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from Dickinson College, and his Master of Architecture degree from Columbia University, graduating with honors for excellence in design. In 1993, he established Shop Architects PC with his four partners in New York City. And since 1990s, Shop Architect has been a leader in redefining the practice of architecture. Their own book, Shop Out of Practice, which is a kind of play of the words, published in 2012, outlines all the major points and defines directions to the new 21st century architectural practice. The firm has developed their own unique suite of tools and technologies that allowed them to take a primary position in a wide-ranging conversation about the future of the built environment. Currently, their architectural practice spans 5 continents, and New York City Lower Manhattan office employs 135 employees and collaborators. Shop is 100% right now employee-owned firm. Founding principal Christopher Sharples has been at the center of this critical work, advancing a comprehensive version that unites a pioneer understanding and developing models of fabrication and assembly with deeply human sense of responsibility for the ramification of new ways of building across labor, culture, education, and social justice. Chris has taught, lectured, exhibited, and been published frequently and internationally. The firm received a number of awards and honors for its work. I will just mention a few. In 2014, Shop was named by the Fast Company and its own magazine, the most innovative company in the world. Shop Architects Awards include National Design Award for Architecture Design from Smithsonian Institution, Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum, the Chicago Athenaeum, American Architecture Award, and numerous awards from American Institute of Architects, New York City, and the state chapter. Among recent projects, the design for Atlassian, headquartered in Sydney, Australia, has been recognized in the end of November of 2021 as the best workplace project by the World Architectural Festival. Finally, as I started this kind of friendship and the sometimes in collaboration with Chris, with preparation seminar, had a profound implication for my entire architectural career. I was always inspired by his spirit of optimism about the future and our profession. Without any further interruption, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Chris Sharples.
Thank you, Wojciech and Alessandro and Giovanni for inviting Shop to have a chance to share, some of what we do and how we do it with the students and the faculty tonight. Again, as Wojciech said, we've known each other for a very long time, and in a way, just coming out of school. So it's been great to sort of mature the conversation over decades and see where we've come. So without further ado, let me share screen here. Okay, can everybody see that? Great. So let me just minimize the box. Okay, so just to, as the title of the lecture is Manufacturing Brighter Futures, and as Wojciech mentioned with our book Out of Practice, there's always some play on words. And in a way, I'm going to unpack this title as we go through some of the work and some of the processes. But one thing I would just start off by saying is that really looking at how we not only design, but how we use models and the critical role of models as we move through the design process in the realization of our built environment and the foundation for our communities. That's not okay. So one of the key things about our office, because we've all taught, and we spent a lot of time in the academy working with researchers, is that we see the academy is really the thinkers, and the profession is the makers. And we think it's critically important that we have one foot in both of those spaces, because it's not only about applied research in the field, it's applied research that could be going on in the academy. Is something that we pride ourselves on, having those relationships. The other thing that we think is really important, you can't make great architecture, great space without having a great client. I think Lou Kahn talked about that quite a bit when he was collaborating with Jonas Salk. And that's a very important part of our process, is our relationship with the client team. The other thing is I would say that we are not a style-based practice. We're really geared towards performance-based design, and I'll get in a little more detail what I mean by that. But basically, we like the idea that all our work looks different, but the way that we use materials and the way we go about fashioning materials is actually, there's a lot of shared DNA. And this to us is a really important aspect of the work. And this is where, because when you're working at the scale of a building, a scale of city, it's really figuring out how you can break the scale down to the human, to the pedestrian on the street, that first 40 feet, the community. And materials and the way those materials are fashioned, articulated, play a big role in creating that human scale connection. But as Alessandro said, so much of what we all do in this space is how we engage with the community. And yes, we're doing a lot of ground up placemaking, but it's also understanding what's been there, the place keeping, and how you bring those two together. So these are just some of the, and we do this with our clients, we sort of outline what are some of the key components in terms of creating great public realm experience, and scale obviously is one of those. Biophilia, maximizing daylight, connectivity, that first 40 feet, because typically people aren't always looking up, they're really walking down the street, and it's what they see in that first 40 feet that's really important. So really it's about a collection of different experiences being brought together and made physical through architecture and space. And so for us to create really great architecture, you start by creating great public experience, and the two really inform each other. And I think for us, the Barclays Arena, which we completed in 2012, was really sort of the culmination and a turning point for us. We had started our very first project with a waterfront park in Greenport, Long Island, and then moved, more than a decade later to the scale of an arena in downtown Brooklyn. But what was amazing for us was the importance of the public realm before you even went into that sporting venue. And the way that space, that plaza, has become part of the city and experience, and a place where people can come together and share and also demonstrate and speak out loud. And for us, this is what great public space is. You go to Italy, you go to the piazzas, you have a market at one moment, you can have a demonstration another moment, or people could just be hanging out. So really embodying the idea of a space that can actually change. But as I said, it's also about place keeping, working with existing infrastructure and looking at how we can give it a new lease on life, adapt it for the future. And so some of the work we're doing on this big mixed use project in Williamsburg, where we did the master plan, is all about understanding the importance of public space to building a great, community experience. And what was great with working with the developer on this project, Two Trees, Jed and David Luentis, is that they understood to make this work day one, you had to build the park first. And so, field operations, James Corners Field Operations, is a landscape architect. The first building, residential building we did, which you see here, Site E, is designed really, in a way, it's a backdrop, but again, using zinc and copper and articulating these materials to really sort of address that sort of human scale relationship. but at the same time, always trying to orient views and connections to the East River and to that park. Because at the end of the day, it's the park that is the life breath of this whole new district. And it's not just for the district, it's also for the Williamsburg community. And this is something that has been so exciting to see grow and change, and that whole immediate connection back to New York's amazing waterfront. So for us, this is a great example of placemaking and placekeeping in action. We also had an opportunity to take that idea further with a project on the Lower East Side for Essex Market. And this is what they had torn all these buildings down in the 70s. You can see the Twin Towers in the background. And then the site laid vacant for 4 decades. And it wasn't until, not the Bloomberg administration that they put an RFP out to do a master plan. And again, you're going into this fabric and it has an amazing history. The Essex Market is a huge anchor to this community, but also all the different restaurants and shops and the street vendors. So how do we bring that and actually make that the glue that really defines this new master plan district? And so this just gives you a sense of the scale of it. It goes over many, many blocks. But the market hall is the glue that connects a lot of these buildings together. It's at grade, but it's also subgrade, and it has a connection directly to the subway as well. So you can come via the street or you come via mass transit. But the experience is to bring you into this market hall. And just so you know, because you're going to see a lot of digital images today, we do sketch here. This is a sketch I did for this project, and it just gives you a sense that it's very important, especially when you're working with communities, that you don't show up with renderings in those first meetings. They want to be a part of the process. They want to see how things are evolving and developing in time. But moving from the sketch to the actual space, really giving you a sense of that idea, the vitality and experience of coming into this market space and scaling it again to the stalls. And in this case, we have a show kitchen where the community can come in and actually, have cooking classes or shows that sort of show some ideas that actually take some of the fare that's actually sold in the market. And then the other thing was important was really opening it up to the street. And this elevation faces south. So by lifting the roof up, we can actually bring daylight down into the B1 level of the building. And then again, capturing some of the signage that you see, that's always been very much a part of the architecture of the Lower East Side. So jumping from those sort of community-based projects to, the future of work, we started we won a commission 6 years ago to do Uber's first ground up headquarters in Mission Bay, San Francisco. And, thinking about the work community, how is that changing? Well, we all see how it has changed over the past 2 years. We've seen a very strong desire for having more connection with the outdoors, with nature, biophilia. We also see how important it is to have the office. It's a place where people come together and can collaborate. So the idea here was, in a lot of office buildings, especially if they're more than 1 or 2 stories, you have to get on the elevator. And we really wanted to break out of that sort of concept that to move between floors, you got on elevators. So what we created here was what we term a vertical commons. And almost taking the Uber app where you can actually navigate, where your car is coming from, when it's going to arrive. And literally everybody can move through this building without necessarily having to use an elevator. They can if they want, but the idea is to really bring people outside of the space and sort of share this sort of vertical commons collaboratively. And this is some images of the building as it was finished earlier last year. And the bridge connections, they're double-decker bridges. You can walk on top, you can walk in them. And then, the whole idea of how this building reflects what's going on around it. But one of the big key concepts to this project, because it is a class, office building, is we wanted that vertical commons to share a relationship with the outside. And the climate in San Francisco is an amazing climate throughout the year. So what we did was we created a untempered commons. There's no mechanical systems here. And basically the way we cool the space when it heats up is through a breathing facade. And so we did our simulation analysis to understand how the space would heat up and get cooled down throughout the day, throughout the year. And it's through the system that automatically opens up the facade. So what was really exciting about this building is it never looks the same. And then because glass reflects so nicely, you get these interesting reflections of either the sky or the surrounding buildings as this facade starts to open up and unfold. And so it's become sort of this dance. Now there are other aspects to this. We created, a green roof that also has an amphitheater, but really creating that commons into a space for people to really hang out and share experiences together using more materials like wood, champagne colored metal. But this is an example of what we think is important about how it ties back to the local community. You may not work at Uber, but the thing is, you can actually look up into this commons. It's sort of like the glass bottom boat in reverse, where you can actually look up and see the buzz and the energy. This is some views of being inside those commons, and the level of transparency is amazing because this glass is only a single layer glazing because it's not a conditioned space. So it creates the building feels like it's always open. And so as Wojtek mentioned, we've been taking some of those ideas and applying them to future projects. Atlassian's new headquarters in Sydney, Australia reflects the same idea. Here we have a hybrid structural system where we're using mass timber and a steel lattice frame to support a series of 8 wooden villages that literally culminate in this garden on the roof. And the idea here, just like with Uber, the facade is designed to breathe and open up and take advantage of the outdoor climate. And then this is a view of it at night. So we're now moving into construction documents on this project. And then this is a small project we did for Syracuse University. It's the first veterans research center for vets who are returning, who want to go back to school or move forward with some entrepreneurship programs. But here we're using, again, mass timber to actually create the sort of the surface, the nest for a 1,000-seat theater. And what was really exciting about this is working with fabricators, and again, I'll get into this in a moment, and developing our own tools, our own scripts to how we would go about modeling this, but how we would share this information with a fabricator so that they could actually make it. And that was not only for the exterior, but also for the interior, working with DigiFab out of Albany. So really looking at how we take a very warm bio-based material and transform it through this process of making and tooling, right down to the facade, and then the parade ground on the roof. So people have this connection with nature, but they can also see the Richardson building, one of the first buildings on the Syracuse campus in the background. So they, at the same time, they feel connected with the overall campus of Syracuse. And I assume some of you have seen some of the skyscrapers that we're doing and are in the process of doing here in New York. I'm just sharing a few here. This is 111 57th Street. For us, our office is located here in the Woolworth Tower. This building is wrapped in terracotta, just as this building here in a way was inspired by that. And the way that we developed the pattern for the terracotta is 26 different shapes, and they move back and forth. And that's how you get this sort of feathered shaping of the building as you look at it. And again, we know there's going to be people living in this building. They're going to have great views of Central Park, but it's really important that when we do these kinds of buildings, that we're also celebrating the city experience. Just like when you look at the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building, it also has to belong to the citizens of our city. And then this is another building for the same developer, American Copper, over on the East River. And again, instead of terracotta, we're working with copper. So eventually this building's going to turn green. It's going to be the Statue of Liberty on the East River when it's finished patinaing. But again, the bridge in this case is actually the amenity that is shared by both buildings. So instead of having an amenity in each building, we actually use the bridge as a way to sort of have everybody have a great view either of the river or of the Empire State Building. And then this is the building that we just finished topping out on. And I'll show you a little more about what we've been doing with this building when it comes to some of the tools we use on the job site. But we are also a global practice, and we're working in cities like Sydney and Melbourne. This is a project we just completed in Melbourne. And again, the public realm was a huge, huge priority for the city of Melbourne. The city, the community, the city agencies really wanted to understand how this building would meet the ground. And it's a mixed use project. It has a hotel, has commercial space, has residential space, it has an office building. And so understanding how we begin to create this connection to the public realm, to these different programs. This is a view of the green space up on the roof for the residents. So really pulling some of that biophilia and that natural connection up all the way through the building to some of the amphitheater out near where the hotel entrance is, you could see in the distance there. Another thing that was really important and very similar to what we did at Domino is the city didn't want a skyscraper that would cast a shadow on the Yarra River. So we basically turned it into a pair of trousers and stepped it down, and that prevented the casting of shadows on the river. The other thing that's really important that we've been working with Overseas Building Operations, which is a department within our State Department that basically manages and develops all our embassies all over the world. So these are just a few of the projects that we're doing for them. The first one on the far left is our new embassy that is in construction, Tegucigalpa, Honduras. The middle one is a project we're doing for our embassy in Bangkok. And the other one is in Milan, is going to be our new consulate in Milan. And so it's been really exciting because each one of these share the same programs, the same security requirements. But we have to remember, we're a guest in somebody else's country. And so really about that idea of placekeeping, materials, the way we fashion those materials actually speak to some of the sort of the aesthetics, some of the beauty, some of the artistic culture that we see and experience when we visit these places. So, okay, I sort of talked a little about using some of our projects, the whole concept of how community is very much a part of how we think about design and approach design. But now I really want to talk to you about what we need to do to really, change the way we work. And I'm talking more about the community of architects, engineers, and builders. And I would add owners to that as well. And it's really about innovating the process. We are on the cusp of a process revolution. And I'll sort of explain what I might mean by that. But you might ask, why now? Why is this important? Well, the fact is, we've got some wicked problems out there. Yes, we love designing buildings. We love working in cities. But the fact is, we got some big problems. We got a housing crisis, and it hasn't changed, even with the pandemic. And we got a climate crisis that is just accelerating, with what's been going on in terms of the way that the building industry, the architecture industry, the engineering industry is not addressing in a proactive and aggressive way how we deal with emissions. But the fact is, more and more people are moving to the cities. I know some left New York at the beginning of the pandemic, but basically everybody see the rent prices are going up. There's not enough housing. We have a huge issue. In this country alone, 4.6 million new apartments are needed. That's just in the United States. The other thing is the amount of embodied carbon. And that's something that has to be addressed. So the other thing that people are slowly becoming more aware of is the amount of forced labor in the supply chain. So there is a lot of slavery that goes into building a building. And so how do we deal with that? How do we first of all, how do we make it transparent so that we can actually begin to address it is another part, one of the other big challenges that we're facing right now. But the fact is, you know, while architecture is advanced, construction remains in the dark ages. And the fact is, when you look at what came out in 2017, you know, when McKinsey wrote that first report, basically construction in terms of innovation was behind hunting and farming. So the hunter-gatherers have been more innovative than what we've been doing on the job site since, let's say, World War II. So the thing is, we've got to begin to change our behavior. And this is not dumping it on the build side. This is us all working together. You know, we work in a very siloed, you know, disaggregated environment where we're not sharing and collaborating with each other. So the challenge here is how do we start to address these things? The inefficiencies, the fact that we're still seeing 2D documents being used and it's all still representational. And the issue of safety on the job site, the amount of reworking that goes on and change orders, and then the waste. The fact is everything is being brought to the job site and a lot of waste is being accumulated. But the thing that a lot of people tend to forget is it really ruins, you know, the experience for people who live near job sites. You know, the community, you've got congestion, you got pollution, you got noise, you got issues with safety, you know. So the fact is, all these things are things that we have the tools and some of the know-how to start addressing. So the question is, how do we change the behavior? How do we start becoming more proactive about that? And for us, one of the areas that has inspired us, and if you ever come to shop, like Wojciech has been here, one of the things you'll see besides a lot of architecture models is airplane models, car models, boat models. And looking at other industries, especially advanced manufacturing, to really inspire and influence the way that we can evolve and innovate our process. And so this is something that really captured us. And if you go back to 1995, when Nova had the 3-part miniseries on the 777, and you can download it from YouTube, it's really great to watch how a model-based digital twin organized the whole process from design, engineering, to manufacturing, to the customer. And the only thing that's really funny to watch it now is just the suits everybody's wearing. But what was amazing is to see the level of collaboration that was happening across many different work streams. And so here's an X-ray from our building information model for American Copper. So imagine we can see all the mechanical infrastructure that goes into this building. We can navigate through that. Not too different from what you see in the car industry, where you see all the parts and understand how they all go together. So we all built, I assume a lot of people on this call have built models. And, you know, one of the things that my twin brother and I love when we were building models is just looking at the instructions. And so moving from a representational 2D drawing to 3D axonometrics that are instructing you about how to put something together. We find I never had to call Japan to figure out how to put their models together. You know, the instructions and I didn't have to read. I'm dyslexic, so I wasn't a very good reader. All I had to do was look at the pictures. So again, what you see here is an image of all the pieces that we modeled in Rhino back in 2003, before it was parametric, to how we took all that information and could send it directly through CAD/CAM processes to our fabricators, where the whole project, and it's a very small project, this is a camera obscura, it's only 400 square feet, every element was put together sort of like IKEA for buildings. And so right there in 2003, with a very small project, it was sort of the DNA, the genesis of this thinking of how we could begin to think about not only how we design, but how we make things. And this gets into the subject of means and methods, which architects aren't really supposed to be involved in. But if we're going to solve this problem, we have to, when we design, we have to think about how it gets made and also how we share information. use that information to instruct the process. So one of the things that's exciting right now is how augmented reality allows us to really begin to interrogate in a very intimate and collaborative way how these systems come together. And so it could happen this way. It happens in many different ways, and I'll share with you some of these other ways. But again, technology for us is a tool. It's not something that we're doing it to, you know, glorify it as part of the architecture. It plays a role in how we collaborate and work with others. As I said, a lot of our small projects are where we test innovation. The two you see here were done within 6 months of each other. One on the left was a large 3D printed structure that we did for Art Basel in Miami using carbon fiber and 3D printed bamboo. And the other is a traditional material, terracotta, which we did for the Milan Furniture Fair. And the processes of putting these two little pavilions together were quite different. One used a KUKA and the other used a CNC cutter. And really understanding what tools do you use, what are the processes that you need in order to put these things together. And understanding how they literally would be put together, because, you know, they had to be put together by people. How heavy could they be? And that was something that was part of the design thinking for these two projects. But what was great is these projects were completely manufactured. They were designed completely in the computer, and all the files from the model were sent directly to the fabricators. And for us, again, what's exciting is the materiality, the scale, the way the materials are worked really creates this beautiful human connection that we really experienced when we were on site, and just seeing how people would touch things and rub up against them. And the other thing that was really exciting is that they could actually be taken apart, designed for disassembly. So in the case of Miami, it was actually moved to the design district and was in a park for 3 years. And now it was taken down again. And now it's at the University of Nairobi in Kenya. And for this project, this will actually become part of one of the sculpture pieces for the new consulate we're doing in Milan. So as I said, for us, a lot of the inspiration is coming from the world of advanced manufacturing. We're working with people from Boeing, we're working for people at Tesla and SpaceX. And we're also working with software companies. We've had about a 15-year relationship with Dassault Systems. We use 3D Experience. We also built an incredible relationship with Unity and some of the gaming engines. We also just signed a contract with Sony. And it's really important that we don't run in a situation where the software manufacturers are coming to us and saying, these are the tools that we made for you. It's really about creating that feedback loop where we're telling these are the kind of tools that we need in our space. We create our own tools, we script our own tools, but at the same time, we really like to collaborate and beta test with a lot of these companies. And so really getting into the visualization side of things. As we saw with traditional analog models, people love models. So wouldn't it be great to actually get inside your model, to understand how you make something that's invisible visible? And so this is where augmented reality plays a big role, and the digital twin, where we can actually go in and walk a space with our client in real time using these, whether in this case, an iPad. And, you know, in this case, you know, applying that iPad to a model of the Brooklyn Tower to understand the different facade elements that go into the building. Or in this case, going out on site with the client and giving them a sense of what that building might look like when it's built. And what we've learned from this process is when we start pre-design and concept design with masses, we can actually go out to the site with ownership and they could test out different massings. And what we found is they tend to choose a massing in that very first meeting. And so in a way, we've collapsed the time through this collaborative, intimate relationship between technology and being in the space of the actual context. Where this is becoming really important, you're seeing this a lot with a lot of tech companies, is how augmented reality can play a role on the job site. You know, whether it's companies like OpenSpace or Reconstruct. The challenge we see that's really important is that information should be tied to a 3D model, not necessarily to a 2D drawing. Because as you know, moving from 2D to 3D, you can always forget things. But whenever you're always in the model, you can see everything. So the key is, how do we move from this disaggregated condition of multiple models being thrown away, new models being created, to the idea of an organic process where everybody's sharing the same model in a cloud-based platform. And it's a model that's organic and grows and iterates with time, as more intelligence, more detail is put into it as you move from design to construction to post-occupancy. So for us, this is really exciting, because you could walk on a job site and help inform your MEP installers what things are supposed to look like. And then you can begin to coordinate them in real time. And this is the kind of collaboration that we get excited about. But remember, we're talking about means and methods now. And that's something that architects aren't supposed to be involved with. So we also have to change some of the rules of the game in order to get in there. And really, it's so much about how we manage risk. Right now, the way we all manage risk is we silo it. Architects manage this risk, engineers manage a certain amount of risk, and builders manage it. And as a result, if you run into a problem, people tend to throw it over the fence. It says, that's not my problem, that's your problem. And the only way to get around that is to really approach it through a model-based process, to really build a community where everybody's sharing information and managing risk collectively. And not only within the AEC, but also with the ownership team. And so what you're seeing here is, this is a component from our Botswana Innovation Hub. And you see that wireframe mesh in there. This is a 3D experience. All those lines have attributes that are assigned to those different materials. So if I move that wireframe around, it actually updates the model parametrically, and it also updates the panels next to that particular model. So it's again, when we did the camera obscura, we actually had to go in and change things within the Rhino model. So it just shows how far things have come in terms of how we can begin to really impact the process and create that sort of level of intimacy and difference. Now, this is something that's really become really important to us, is the idea is that, you know, instead of having your projects go into a flat file, or the only way you can view it is if you're in the office or in the job trailer, imagine if you can view your project on your phone or on your iPad. So we created what we call Project Portal. So all the shop projects are in the Project Portal. So you can look at models, in this case, Brooklyn Tower, where you can understand where you are in the construction process. Or you can take that model and put it on a table, on your dining room table, and view it. Or you can, again, go to Street View. So the whole idea is the possibility of how we create a more plastic, more iterative, more organic relationship with how we use models. And I don't think this is like necessarily a new idea. If you go back to the Renaissance, you know, Brunelleschi used a model to convince everybody how the Duomo goes together. You know, popes and bishops, everybody, kings looked at models. And Alberti said, you know, you got to build a model, not only to help instruct people how to build a building, but it's also a good way to get a basic cost estimate for the project. So go figure. A lot of the same things we talk about today were talked about hundreds of years ago. So the other thing, and I'll show this in a moment in greater detail, is censoring is going to play a big role. I mean, the amount of data that is going to be available and to be able to act on, AI, machine learning are going to become a very important aspect of our space. That doesn't mean architects are going to go away. Our experiences, our common sense, the complexity of the building, it would be very hard for anything with AI to really be able to manage all that. But where becomes really helpful is if we have a lot of data streams, it can start to help us with fire safety challenges, door schedules, and all kinds of other things that could relieve us of some of what we could call the drudgery work, but also do these checks to make sure we are meeting all the requirements, whether it's energy code or life safety. So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, how we communicate with that is really, really critical. Now, one other aspect that we have found that has been incredibly profound to our process, also how we share information with our clients, is our fully immersive space. And this is a concept that actually came out of a teaching experience I had up at Yale. Anna Dyson, who's the chair of the environmental program up there, created a fully immersive environment from scratch called Beam Lab, Built Environment Ecosystems Measurements Lab. And this space you go into, and you could put all your data streams, you can actually put yourself in the site in the 360 in real time and experience what it would be like to be on that site. So you imagine in remote situations, how this tool could be a huge, huge help. But what's great is we can connect that space to our portals, and we can actually navigate using our phones in this kind of environment. And again, what it does, like gaming, it can actually be fun. And once things are fun, people tend to latch on and keep playing with it. The other thing is the whole idea of being able to go into spaces and navigate them in real time. And in this case, you know, bring the whole space, like in this case, Atlassian into the 360. And what we found, especially when we do test fits with clients, is that they're able to see things and sign off on them. They see what the impact of the data is on the experience. And we see this as a key tool for communities. To imagine if you have a community board meeting and you can actually bring people into these kinds of environments and really share and critique them in real time. And also how we start to take these ideas to the whole idea of manufacturing. And I'll get into that in a moment. So one thing, it's not just here at Shop, you could go to the App Store and download the Shop portal. We have Brooklyn Tower on there, so you could sort of have a little fun playing around with that so you can get a feel for what I'm talking about. So if you go to the App Store, it's called Shop Portal, and the guest code is featured. So this is the other thing that's really exciting. As I said, there's lots of data that's being created out there, and how do we go about managing? You know, when Google Earth came about, it was fantastic to be able to go navigate through cities and stuff. I spent my 1985-86 year studying in Bologna, Italy. And I thought it would be really cool because I have all these great memories of Piazza Maggiore and the loggia, never getting wet when it rains, and the food. And going in Google Earth and being able to analyze and understand the qualities of what makes that city so special. And you measure, you have empirical information and you have experience, my own experience, and I bring those two together, and it starts to tell you something about why is Bologna such a great city? Why is Paris why is New York? What makes them also unique? And those are the kinds of things that we now have access to. Okay, and so what we've done is you can go in there and take clippings from different cities, Hong Kong, Butler's Wharf in London, or as I said, Piazza Maggiore in Bologna. And then what we do is we create our own voxelized meshes. And what that allows us to do is break the volumes down into bits that allows us to analyze them, whether it's daylighting analysis or height, or really important, program. And what you find is how different some cities are. And you look at Bologna, it's almost like the program is just marbling into every aspect of the city fabric versus Hong Kong, where it's really district-based. The other thing is when you start projects, you know, understanding what are the constraints, what are the design goals and design principles. And you work these out with your owner, you work these out with the community, and then you develop models that show how the shape of the building, the partie of the building might change based on how much you toggle between these different forces. The other thing that we're finding really important with these tools and this data is that we can start applying really solid, hard data in concept design and in master planning. And we can take it from other projects. It doesn't mean that, okay, I'm going to take, you know, a wall system or a structural system, and that's going to be the system we use for that project. But what it does is it gives you a sense, a forecast of some of the costs, some of the scheduling challenges, some of the embodied carbon issues by, in a way, testing out some of these ideas. And quite literally, you can go down to, you know, a hanging clip in order to understand that. And then bringing that back into a schedule. So what happens is as you start moving through this process, you're constantly updating your model. It's an iterative process, there's feedback. So by the end of the day, when you have things pretty much figured out, you're moving from the iterative process to the design process. You're now really taking critical, real information and moving it into the built environment. And that's what we learned. That was a turning point for us when we were doing Barclays. We not only designed the building, but we actually created all the shop fabrication information. Here we exfoliated all 12,000 panels from the building. We had an automated software that nested all those panels on sheets of steel. The size of the steel sheet was governed on sheet optimization. So we were able to save $500,000 by just really scaling those sheets to the right size to really optimize material use. And here you're seeing, we automated the shop ticket process. We asked the fabricator, give us all the information you need for us to generate shop tickets for your project. So everything that's in that box to the right, all those numbers, that's the information they sent us. And then we generated this automated script. And then what we did was we tagged each one of them. And you're seeing this now. This is not anything new. Everybody's seen this. But the idea is that you're able to share this information with everybody, in this case, the owner, so that when those get scanned, you know whether it's being cut, whether it's being weathered, whether it's being put together, it's on the truck or it's on the building. You can see in real time where all those components are. And again, when you start looking at supply chain transparency, that becomes a real critical thing. But at the end of the day, you are creating a digital twin of the project. And so it's not a representation anymore. It is the actual building as a virtual construct. And that was what was so exciting about working on Barclays, was to actually take the 3D experience, something that you use to build airplanes and cars, and apply it at a building scale. And a building that was quite complex. Not one of those panels was the same. So what was really exciting was how we took that idea and took it to Botswana, Africa. How we were working on an innovation hub, and the client, the government in Gaborone, said, we want you to design this building, but we also want you to share with us how you use technology. So this whole concept of tech transfer. So it was great. We had university students come in, we trained them how to use the software, and now they're working on the project. But the other thing that was really exciting is how we took the same ideas that we developed at Barclays, how we started to build a relationship with the fabricator, in this case in Cape Town, South Africa. So what you're seeing is the build sheet for one of those range screen panels. And again, on the project portal, you can see all the panels and the different colors that sort of make up the different sort of groupings of these panels. This is an old shot. I need to get an updated view. It's almost finished. But what's really exciting, we did this on Barclays too, is we did a digital scan of the structural steel because we wanted to make sure all the clips were in the right place. On Barclays, 16% of the clips were misaligned. And so John Cerrone, a head of technology and one of my partners, was actually up in the superstructure with an iPad showing the iron workers, we need to cut these clips and reposition them. Because if we didn't, you bring one of these big mega panels in there and it doesn't fit, you got to put it down on the ground. And there wasn't a lot of laydown area. And then you put it down on the ground, it could get damaged. So we needed to have all those panels go up right the first time. And that was what's so beautiful about doing the scan, because we do the scan and then we overlay the scan on our digital twin and we can see if everything's lining up. And if it isn't, we fix it. It's what I call the second fitting. It's like when you go back to get your suit fitted, all the nips and tucks are done. And that's what we're doing here in this process. And here you can see some of the panels going up on the building. So this is the build sheet. You get like the model kit, you get all the pieces, you understand how they go together, you get a list of pieces, and then you get an axon of where that piece is going to go. And what was great is everything was fabricated in Cape Town and left in pieces. Then the pieces were, all these puzzle pieces were sent to the job site. And just like IKEA, they're looking at the drawings like a model and they're putting these together. So putting them together in a controlled work environment. And the project, as you can see, the quality and the craftsmanship is just amazing. And this is out in the middle of nowhere. And again, the whole idea of tech transfer. So we have now trained a whole construction group how to use these kinds of tools. So they imagine the possibility going back there and doing another building would be fantastic. And the thing is, one of the materials that really works with design for manufacturing assembly and prefab is bio-based materials like mass timber, because you could again create those 3D files and send them directly to the milling machines. And so you can literally, you know, my brother and I grew up on a farm and we had a barn, and the whole idea of, you know, we lived near a lot of Amish, and, you know, they would raise the whole structure in a weekend. And so the whole, and it was quiet and it was beautiful. So imagine this kind of construction going on in the city. I mean, I think a community would love to be near a project that would be utilizing and having these kinds of materials going up in real time. So this brings me to the sort of the last part of the talk is, so we're looking at how we can use these tools and the concept of advanced manufacturing and how we work collaboratively along these different groupings, architects, engineers, and builders. And then how do we try and get a lot of what happens on the job site in our cities off into a controlled work environment? So when we were doing Barclays, Bruce Radner, who was the head of Forest City, said, you know, I have to deliver 6,000 units of new housing. It's part of the agreement for Pacific Street. And half of that had to be workers' housing. It had to be affordable. And so when we started on the first project on Dean Street, we started out as a conventional building. And as we were getting into design development, he said, you know, I really like to see what it would be like if we changed our building into a modular building. I want the design to be the same, but I want to see if we can do it volumetrically. So he gave us 8 weeks to work on it. It ended up taking us 16 weeks because, you know, it was a huge learning curve. We worked with Arup, we worked with some modular consultants that were out there in the field. But basically, we took a conventional drawing set and turned it into a volumetric modular model. And, you know, it was a process. And it also forced us to start thinking about how you make things, how you source things. How do you break the scale of this building down into these sub-assemblies and components? So right away, we're starting to think like manufacturers. And the other thing is, how do you just break the building down into these volumes? There were 23 different unit types. So it's not like one size fits all, which is typically when you hear about modular, they're thinking about trailer homes or jails. But here you're talking about a place that people are going to live in. And there was a lot of concern from the press that we were just going to be putting up boxes and people are going to be living in boxes. But as you can see, we had triangles, we had trapezoids, we had all kinds of shapes here. So beyond the 23 different units, we had hundreds of variations. But these were the base components that go into a mod, in this case, a studio mod. And the next slide is it's not advancing. We did it first in Revit. We didn't go right into CATIA. And then at the end of the day, we didn't go into CATIA because the contractor actually didn't want us to do that. So we weren't involved in the factory at all. But what we knew that you can't just take a Revit model and build right from it. You need to create instructions, just like I was showing you with Barclays. And so what we learned from this process is they just took the construction site and moved it into the factory. And what we saw, we didn't see any more efficiency. It was much safer because you're working on the ground. One thing we did notice, which was exciting, is the trades were being mixed. So typically on a job site, you don't mix trades, there's rules. And so what's exciting is you saw a lot of collaboration, but the fact is people are still working with drawings, and it was still construction just under a roof. And you see there's drywall and everything. But you know, it was made in Brooklyn. It was made in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So there was a great story here. It wasn't like necessarily taking jobs away from construction workers, but at the same time, it wasn't necessarily innovative. But what was really beautiful about the project, though, is it didn't look modular, and it had all these different facades on the building. And so we could prove that you could make a beautiful building that was also modular. And that was something that was a big concern for a lot of people was, is this going to be something people are going to really enjoy living in? And this is something that we've heard very good things about from, actually our client, Bruce Ratner actually lived here for a period of time and he just enjoyed it. And so the thing is, we were really excited about that, but we were quite disappointed with the process. And so you can see, there it is with Barclays and B2 and with Dean Street. So we were not happy with the process and we were getting stonewalled, and we just finally decided, if we're going to do this, we've got to do it ourselves. So 3 years ago, we started a new company called Assembly. And it really grew out of a conversation we had with some designers from Pininfarina, a car designer, very famous car designers. Alessandro and Giovanni know who these people are, out of Turin. They've done work for Ferrari, the Aston Martin, BMW. These guys really know how to design. And they saw some of our modular work, and they saw how we were using technology, and they said, "My God, you're using the same software we use." And they invited us over, and we went into their factory. They showed us how they use gate reviews, which is what car manufacturers and aerospace engineers use, but using the model as a way to really interrogate the process. And so what was exciting is we could see what we could do to change their process to one that would do buildings. So we have very strong relationships with people at Boeing. Our advisor in our new company, one of our advisors was the chief technical officer for the Dreamliner. He also worked on the 777. And what you see here is the whole idea of a plane broken down into sub-assemblies. And those sub-assemblies are sourced globally, not just in the United States, all over the world. So the thing is, this is what we typically see. Majority of our buildings, all the stuff arrives at the job site. So imagine you're in the thickness of the city, and everything that you need to build that building has to come through city streets to the job site. And it's very constricted. So then what you're seeing with a lot of modular companies is that they just are trying to verticalize. They want to control every aspect. So in a way, they're bringing the construction site into a controlled work environment. But if you saw what happened with Katera, they basically bought up their whole supply chain. And the challenge with doing that is your overhead is immense, and it's very hard to scale. And if you run into a dry cycle, you still have to pay all that overhead. The other thing is, you want your supply chain to innovate on their own dime. So you don't necessarily want to buy them up. So the model that we're using at Assembly is the same model in the car and aerospace industry. It's a tiered system where you have component suppliers that supply materials and systems to sub-assembly fabricators, to the bathroom pod, kitchen pod, the mechanical system, the facade. And then all those things are packaged up and sent to a tier 1 facility. And typically the tier 1 facility is in a very close proximity to the city. It's not hundreds of miles away. And so you're able to bring local labor workforce into these controlled environments, but there's no welding, there's no sheetrocking. It's all bolt and fitted elements, assemblies. And so really changing the way, moving from construction to a fully manufactured product. Now, suddenly people are going, what do you mean? You know, well, what do you need an architect or interior designer if that's what's going to happen? Because that means you're controlling the whole process. The key here, there's only 3 elements in this system that are standardized: the steel chassis, the MEP system, and the facade locking system. We can take, you know, different art. You can have a Frank Gehry facade, you can have a Norman Foster facade, we could white glove it. You can have an interior designer come in and say, I want to do the interiors in these materials. The key is taking that information and putting it into the digital platform and being able to set it up so that we can go to our pre-qualified fabricators to make those pieces. And the key is it remains an open supply chain. So you just don't have one fabricator for a bathroom pod. You can have multiple fabricators and they all bid on the job. And if one's busy, maybe the other one gets the bid. So it's really understanding how we take this information, model-based information, and we share it. Now, this is a studio. I'm going to show you what a 1-bedroom looks like in a moment. But what you see here are all the components you need to do this studio. And those components have embedded attributes. They're not representations. They actually have the information that you need to actually fabricate all those components. So it's really about developing this whole tech stack. The digital platform is really the glue. This is what I'm talking about, innovating process, is how we use technology to not only manage complexity, but also manage risk, how we forecast and deal with predictability. One of the things one of our developers said to us, Marianne Gilmartin said, you know, if you can guarantee me price and predictability, I'm willing to pay a premium. And this is the mentality that we need right now in our profession. We have to move from a deliverables fee for service model to an award based on performance, so that we can actually get proper compensation. We are in a creative field. People are working their butts off, but the fact is we are not the ones who are taking the majority of the risk. It's the developer. It's the one who gets the financing. If something goes wrong, they are losing millions and millions of dollars. And so the thing is, if we can help manage that risk for them in a very transparent, collective way, we should be rewarded for that. And that's something that the profession really needs to begin to start embracing. And again, going into the whole idea of how you even set up your tier 1. So you can run simulation analyses and begin to understand what's working. We do this over and over and over again. And as we start putting things together, you're going to get feedback. And what goes into what we call the digital triplicate. Everybody's heard the digital twin. Well, the digital triplicate, an example of how digital triplicates are used is like Rolls-Royce engines for Airbus, is they can monitor those engines in real time, whether they're up in the air or on the ground, 24/7, 365 days a year. They can take that data and put it into the digital twin and run it and see if they can improve the performance. And that feedback actually informs the design revisions of that engine. And that goes into a new model. That's the 3rd model. So this whole idea of the feedback loop is something that's really critical for us all to appreciate, because it means that our buildings can actually get better with time through these feedback loops. This is what we call in the manufacturing industry, open architecture. But again, part of this whole process is prototyping and testing. And here we're doing the stacking test with Chimolai outside of Venice. For those who don't know, they're probably best in class when it comes to steel. They did the culture shed, they did Calatrava Station here in Lower Manhattan, they did the steel for Heatherwick's vessel. These guys are best in class, and we wanted to use a fabricator who really understood tolerance, because the key to doing offsite manufacturing is being able to have very good tolerances and managing those tolerances. So the thing is, we do have a project that is on the books that we're working on right now. It's in Harlem. And what we did last September, is we took a 1-bedroom in that project and we did a prototype. And so what you see here, again, like I showed you earlier, these are all the pieces that you need to put that 1-bedroom together. So what I'm going to show you is, and if you go to the Assembly OSM website, you could see this video, but this is something that you typically don't see with a lot of your fabricators. And I don't know if it's going to run. It's strange that it's not running right now, but let's see if it runs. Is that we speeded it up, but we're showing you exactly how this went together. All the components, how they arrive, how they are put together. There's no sheetrock in this mod, so there's no taping or spackling or painting. Everything comes pre-assembled and kitted and fitted into the space. Now, through this process, we already learned a lot. As they're doing this, they're actually taking notes, then they're feeding this back into the model so that we can update. But you can see the mechanical system is kitted out. This is working with more than 40 different fabricators all over the country. You know, the MEP system coming from Boston, the bathrooms coming from Montana. You know, so really looking at how we communicate and pre-qualify our suppliers and how we can really begin to not only get quality, but continue to innovate on that with a supply chain that is very much a part of our design space. And what you see here, you can see what's interesting. You may not be able to see it so well in the video, but there's lots of seams. You really understand how these elements came together. And if you look at some of the, some of the kit houses, whether it's Albert Frey or Usonian or Breuer or Gropius or Prouvé, you really see these prefab subassemblies, and you really understand how things come together into the sort of kit form. And it's, to me, we see it as a celebration of the detail. So here's some stills, and you just see, and what's amazing is this is a market rate. But if we were doing workers housing, what could we do to, make it more affordable? But what could be really interesting is as people live in these homes, they can actually update them. They could put in new material systems. They can update the MEP system. And the MEP system for our units are decentralized. And what I mean by that is we're not utilizing a centralized mechanical system to heat and cool your room. Your air comes from your facade and it's treated in your environment. You control it. So you're not sharing air with other people in the building. And we think that's really important. People will be, especially with the pandemic, people really want to be able to understand their own environments. And so what becomes really exciting with this is the role of sensoring. When you start to put sensors, like you have them near some pipes, and you detect a leak before it starts to get onto your floor. And because this is designed for disassembly, you can actually access these systems. And so what's exciting is it creates that sort of intimate relationship between the homeowner and their home. You can, again, this is something that's on our phones. We can tap on these little icons and we can call up the MEP system, the structure. We can start to really critique and understand what makes up our built environment in a really intimate way. So at the end of the day, I think what's really important is the fact is this many hands make light work. This is not the star architect. This is not the genius architect. This is architects, engineers, builders working together, collaborating together, solving some really wicked problems. And it's going to be an iterative process. But again, really looking at how we can change our process to break down the silos that exist in our industry and begin to manage risk collectively. And at the same time, really change the value model. And in the end of the day, really, create a situation where people can make a very good living in this space and at the same time create really great, affordable, beautiful architecture. So that's pretty much it. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Wojciech, you're muted.
Sorry, I as always absent-minded. So thank you so much, Chris, for this beautiful presentation and showing us all the methods. I have to say that it is incredible in the way how you're developing this prefabrication system. It comes to the heart of interest a lot of us. So maybe I start with a question, and you mentioned about it, about the B2, what you called in Barclays Center, and your experiences. And you've mentioned that the effect was really interesting and successful, but the process, that you were a little bit frustrated of the process, and out of this frustration came your idea to create this company. Can you a little bit dwell on this? Because for me, it's a very interesting, and I hope that for everybody issue.
Yeah, I think I try to, illustrate the fact that, our world, our space that we all operate in is very human-centric. I mean, putting a building together is a complex dance enterprise. And it's not just putting the building together, it's working with the city agencies, it's working with, the community, it's working with your fabricators, your builders, your ownership team, your consultants. There's a lot of people involved in this process. And, when we continue to silo ourselves from each other, because we do operate in a very litigious environment, if something goes wrong, people are pointing fingers. But the thing is, and a lot of it has to do with the amount of ambiguity that's out there. When you look at a drawing set, it's pages of plans and sections. Yes, people are using models, but they're still printing out drawings and they're still referencing information. And that's really hard for let's say, a person who's not used to looking at drawings, like an owner or a community board member, to really understand what the vision is. And so you use renderings, you use physical models to help communicate that. But it's really about figuring out how we move away from the representational approach to how we manage complexity, to one that is a model-based one, where we can immerse ourselves in the model and actually begin to understand how things go together. And then we can begin to choreograph relationships with each other. We can begin to forecast how we're going to problem solve things in real time. And what we found is there's going to be some serious problems. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be unforeseen events. But people tend to want to work it together. And we've seen ideas come from interns, from construction workers, not the foreman. And they're like, say, well, what happens if we looked at it this way? And you're like, hey, we should look at it that way. And that's when it becomes really exciting. You're really taking advantage of all the skill sets and bringing them together into one space and sharing it in a collective way. And that's not exactly what happened with B2. And I got to tell you, I love being on the job site, but the worst thing is to show up and see something that's not right. And you're like, why did that happen? And there's all kinds of reasons. It could have been my problem. It could have been something I'd done wrong, or it could have been something with the fabric, whatever. But the fact is we're in this together, and it shouldn't be a painful process. But I got to tell you, it's still a painful process. So we really want to really bring that sense of community to the industry through these use of these tools. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so maybe at this moment we will take any questions from the audience. Please step out and ask Chris if you have any concerns, if you have any questions. I mean, this was presentation, stunning presentation, and to the degree which shows the new ways of really developing this assembly process. I mean, it has been a talk for a long time. I remember in beginning of this century and looking at the industries like automobile or airplane industry, but I think with your recent approaches in assembly, this becoming a reality that really we're getting to a different level of the modular construction of sites. So saying this,
I think I'll pick it up from there. I mean,
okay.
I'm a ringer, Wojtek, you asked me to be a little prepared. But Chris, it's wonderful to see you again. And I have to thank you for the generosity. We've met several times. You actually toured my students through Barclays Center, and I met you other times besides that. So it's really wonderful to see you. And thank you for a really incredible, I'm overwhelmed to tell you the truth.
We all are.
Of how much, and we do need to talk. We have a lot of intersections in interest and things like that, but we'll talk about those later. To go to what Wojtek was talking, of course, Eero Saarinen was extremely interested in the aircraft industry and auto industry, and also Foster has been looking there. But I think what's really different is that you're reflecting those industries have grown in those last 50 years, and you've grown along with them, and you're trying to integrate them, which really few firms have really brought the idea of the integration of technologies into this, into architecture being applied within the same industry. I guess I have a couple questions. The one question I always put to my students is, with all these new technologies, we're given a great deal of freedom. I actually think we might be entering a new mid-19th century where the designers are actually able to create anything they imagine utilizing these technologies. And so it's almost like it's not arts and crafts anymore, but the idea of the architect as an artisan working in collaboration with the fabricators, I think we're entering a new era. And there's a lot to your design, and actually I think you undersold it because you emphasize process and construction so much. The idea of how design integrates with all these things and shapes those. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
John, first of all, it's great to see you. And it's a very good question. And one of the things I was going to get into it, but I decided, I sort of wanted to focus the lecture a different way, but design thinking. And I really believe, the students should, they should look up what that means. Design thinking is really, in a way, what you're talking about is how do we go about approaching a problem? And where design thinking is being utilized today is solving wicked problems. Really complex, challenging problems like affordability or climate change. So how do you begin a problem, something like that? And there's 4 stages. There's empathizing. And in a way, it's understanding your customer, understanding why are they feeling that way? And Adam Smith, he's known for Wealth of Nations, but it's his first text on the theory of moral sentiment, which is the one that nobody ever really reads. But he goes into the marketplace of Edinburgh and he observes how the grocers and the people selling are actually looking at their customers, asking their customers, what do you want? What are you looking for? And he writes about that whole concept of empathy. So the first thing is we have to empathize with who we're working for or working to solve the problem for. The next from that, we begin to define the problem. And through that define, you set up the constraints. And from that, you begin the process of ideation. So those first 3 steps are critical to set the foundations for a really strong design process. And what we've been borrowing a lot from NASA is that first phase is what we call the intention model phase. It's not like we're really designing everything. We're sort of what I call the pullover. We're creating that sweater and we want to make sure everything fits in it before we start to really design it. Because the second phase is the design model. And ideally what we would like to do with the design model is move directly into that intimate relationship with fabricators. And I do believe it is arts and crafts. It's just using, new technologies to help support it. I believe that we will have a new cottage industry. We won't have to just go to the big guys for parts. We can go to small enterprises. The fact that you can build your own 3D printer now. So the idea is material systems are evolving. We can work at multiple scales, but the key is how do we communicate and share information? And what we found through the model is that we can do it here in New York, and we can also do it in Southern Africa. We can do it in Bangkok. We can do it in all different places all over the world. And that really to us is really exciting. So one of my inspirations was William Morris. And I really do believe we can get back to some of the concepts that he talked about in terms of the role of arts and crafts and creating a really humane built environment.
I'm really, I couldn't agree more. And also my last follow-up question, I'll skip the ones I had in between, was to talk about your humble beginnings, because I'm very familiar with the Greenport project and how you were literally fabricating, and how few of you there were there, and how shop was literally a shop. Because part of this is because I have your book, and of course part of this is because Wojtek is one of my best friends in the universe, and I know this story. But if you could share that with everyone, with the students, about from humble beginnings, this immense enterprise that expanded, a little reflection on the whole process of starting with a hands-on small group, developing ideas. And I guess this is a big part of what I do, is try to inspire my students. So if you could inspire us and on the students that are here, that'd be wonderful, to tell a little bit of story about how you started and how you grew into such an amazing organization, amazing place.
Look, it's a really great question. And when we started out, we all actually won honors for our design abilities in school, but we all went to graduate school together, but we didn't actually all start in architecture. I mean, my brother was probably the closest. He got a degree in structural engineering from Penn State, but I was fine arts, political science, and history, and Corey was in business management, and Greg was in finance. He was coming from banking. And one of the things that we found really critical when we founded the practice was how we could utilize some of these other skill sets and talents in building our business model. It wasn't obvious in the beginning, but it became more and more obvious when we went along. I mean, Greg and Corey are very good at understanding zoning and working with developers and understanding some of the challenges that we face in the built environment when it comes to those things. But the thing that really was always a part of the firm was we love to draw, and because we did a lot of Wojtek and we actually did a bunch of competitions together. And Wojtek, remember, we would build big models. And so when we got Greenport, I remember one of our first meetings with the community was around the model, because a lot of people are like, why aren't we building more stores? We need more stores. We don't need a park. Greenport was in a bad situation. It was on the downturn. The economy was horrible. There was no stores. Everybody was vacant. And they're like, why does Mayor Capel want to put a park here? What's that going to do? And what it proved was you create great public space and people keep coming back. And it transformed the whole village of Greenport. And people are now fixing up their Victorians. But back to the story is that when we went to that meeting, nobody looked at drawings. They looked at the model. They stood around the model pointing things. So as we're developing the design for the project, we would build models. And we reached this point. This was a public works bid. So we had to go with the lowest bidder. And we had a carousel house with 2-ton bifold metal glass doors that were about 15 feet tall by 10 feet wide. And we're like sitting here, and they all move on a worm drive. And we're like, we're going to get slammed with people just weighing the drawings and say it's going to cost this much. So, and we're not, and if you're over by 10%, you have to redesign on your own dime. That was part of the agreement. So what we decided to do was we built a very large scale model of a section of the carousel house, and we photographed it as we're putting together. So when you look at the drawings, you can actually see a picture of what that would look like. And what is basically analog digital twin. And what was beautiful is the bids came in right where they needed to be. And everybody's like, having that little booklet with the pictures was so helpful. And to us, it just started us thinking, this is the way that we need to communicate and manage information. And so, you know, for us, I guess if we hadn't come from making lots of models when we were little and the role of the instructions, I don't know if we would have hit on that.
Do they still even make those models anymore? I just love them so.
Well, if I turn my screen around, you can actually see my whole office is full of models. But if the students ever have a chance to come over to shop, you'll see a lot of models. And again, models, it's amazing when clients come in, they actually want to talk about the airplanes and cars before they talk about the architecture. So it's sort of fun. Breaks the ice. So that for us was really, that was one of the big learning things, is how those models are really the thing that just create that sense of delight and understanding.
No, I think you demonstrated why you and I are one of Wojtek's best friends. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation.
Nice seeing you, John.
Very good. We do need to get together and talk. Take care.
If I can add to this, because being a kind of backseat observer of the wonderful developments when you were really working for all these years and through all the stages, I might add as this kind of, from the side observers, that it was incredible how you somehow improve certain idea going from the project to project, like starting with PS91, then through all the stages which like culminated in this certain like Lehman Brothers project. And you've mentioned about Barclays Center and how you improve through the use of digital to the Botswana project. And what is stunning that even if the office was 6 people, the general idea of shop, which we can have, I think, analogy with Renzo Piano workshop to the degree was there, and then embracing of the digital technology, bringing it to the different level, but the same idea was the same. So that's, in my opinion, the essence of the talents and very hard work of the shop partners.
No, I think it's a very good point. I mean, the thing is, you know, typically, traditionally, what happens is you do a project and then the project goes in a drawer, and you might remember things, you might look at models and it inspires the next project, but really to see all these projects as part of a greater whole. It's an iterative process. You're always learning, and you want to take information that you learn from and be able to apply it in a proactive way. And that's, to us, moves away from just thinking about our work as project specific to this whole idea of an ecosystem. And again, the tools allow us to be able to measure and navigate that ecosystem in a very intimate way. So I did see another question pop up on the chat, and I'd be very open to talking about that. The question is, I would love to hear thoughts about unionization drive at the office. So as you can see, there's been a lot of press out there. I like to say a lot of press that is not true, but you know, I think we're all used to that, especially since 2016. But the fact is that yeah, there was a drive started out just before the holidays took us all a bit by surprise, by a few members, a group of people here at the office who really wanted to see if, bringing the machinist union in to basically represent and help bargain between staff and management. I think the thing is when things happen like that, you got to embrace them. I mean, you're sort of angry and humble at the same time. And so there was a filing for a vote. The staff, a majority of the staff were against it. So the vote got pulled. But like what we see in our space, this is an internal environment that we work in. Culture is everything. And it's all about building a responsive culture. And so I think, there is this desire, there's this mission out there, and I empathize with it. Our industry has to change. And what's interesting about architects, it's very different from a factory where the CEO may have never worked on the factory floor. But I remember being an intern in Richard Meyer's office. I remember we all have had late nights. We know how hard it is, but I would not use the word drudgery to describe what we do. We are part of a creative enterprise, and it's all about how we use technology and innovation to help drive that enterprise in a proactive, positive way. And as I said, we have to move away from a deliverables fee-for-service model to one where we get awarded for our performance. And that's where you create really great competition, healthy competition. And that's where you go to clients and say, this is what we do. This is how we manage risk. This is how we think we can deliver a beautiful project, but it also performs really well. And we should be compensated properly for that. And that's the model that I think, we at SHOP really believe in. And that's a model I think we want to grow the culture, continue to grow the culture around. But again, we're a group, but we're also individuals, and we have a mission. We also have our own individual missions and purposes, and we have to appreciate that and respect that. And so, yes, as a result of the vote being pulled, we will not be having unionized representatives in our space. I hope that answers the question, though.
So
I'm wondering if there is any students that has some question or.
Hi, am I allowed to speak through the microphone? Yeah.
Yes.
So I just had a quick question. At the beginning of your speech, you were talking about construction and how there's a lot of people missing each other and they're just not getting what they need across as fast as possible. And I found it interesting because I read an article recently saying that construction workers are, I believe, in the top 5 of the happiest employed workers. So I was just wondering why you think that is if there's so much miscommunication happening in the field.
Well, that's an interest. I would love if you could share that document with me, because what we're seeing is a migration of people from the construction industry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's continuing. It's not like it's more people are going to construction, people are leaving construction. Now, if you talk to an iron worker, I could see them being really happy. I mean, I've met with iron workers and welders, and they're like, some of the jobs are really great jobs, and some of the jobs are really menial, and it's some of it could be dirty, some is very unsafe. But yeah, I when I'm on a job site, when I was on 111 up in the tower, it was amazing, just the camaraderie and the energy of being around people who really were enjoying putting the terracotta on the building, pouring the slabs. But what we're seeing, especially with some other, like 5/1s and stuff, ticky-tack projects, is that there's a lot of standardization, and we're not necessarily seeing a lot of innovation. We are starting to see more innovation. We're starting to see more robotic activity on the job site. We're seeing the use of construction apps, scheduling apps, safety apps, things that really make the construction site much safer. But you know, it's interesting. I would love to see the article, because what we've been reading, a lot of data out there, McKinsey, if you want to read some really good reports about construction, read all the McKinsey reports, because the construction industry seems to be losing talent instead of gaining talent.
Thank you. And just one more question. You mentioned how you used to build a lot as a kid with your siblings. And I was just wondering, what materials did you use? Because growing up, I played a lot with Legos, which kind of pointed me towards this field. And now even I create ice sculptures with my father during the winter. So I was just wondering what sort of materials you were talking about.
Those are the same things we would have been, you know, our parents were a little worried about me and Bill when we were 18 and we were still playing with Legos. But, you know, Bill's son, Peter, who's graduating this year and has gotten into some really great graphic design. See, John's got it right there. Is that he's still customizing Legos. And he shares them with people. I mean, the last major Lego thing that I built with my son a few years ago was a 7,000 piece Millennium Falcon. Bill just bought the Titanic for Christmas, and Peter's putting that together. I mean, I think that's the largest Lego kit out there right now. But we've got so many Legos still. I mean, if you come to shop, we got Legos here too. So, but yeah, we that and plastic models and building egg glues and building lean-tos. We were all over it when we were little.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So, Dustin, are you there?
Yes, hi, Wojtek. Sorry.
Hi. Hi. So, I somehow wanted to ask you if you have any questions to Chris regarding certain use of software and fabrication method.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the students don't have any other questions, I'm happy to kind of jump in. You know, I thank you, Chris, for the lecture and for joining us. You know, I think it's clear from the lecture that, you know, SHOP has been at the forefront of technology and new technologies. So I'm interested in, you know, what really major shifts in construction do you really see and envision over the next decade?
Well, then again, another great, I just finished doing a book review for a book that's coming out in the spring by Phil Bernstein. And I'm sure, Dustin, you probably know who Phil is. He's assistant dean up at Yale. He was an architect. Then he became a C-level person in Autodesk, and he teaches professional practice at Yale. And the book that's going to be coming out is on AI and machine learning. And I got to tell you, it's a primer that all the students need to read, and it's a primer the professionals should read too. But it really gets into every aspect, from design to addressing some of the social challenges we face in our space to what happens out on the job site and post-occupancy. And it's very exciting because you could see where the different avenues could go. But we are seeing a lot of innovation occurring on the job site right now, not just in the design space, but on the job site. The question is, you know, which ones are going to survive, which ones are going to iterate, you know, it's an interesting question. But I would definitely recommend that book once it comes out. I do see one question. One was, have you ever sent a client a Lego set of the building you know what, one time I built a model of 111. It was about 6 feet tall. And the client got a kick out of that. Yeah, might be fun at a certain point that we actually create some Lego kits of our projects, but we haven't gotten to that. There's another question here. has your firm and approach led to any innovation in the integration of culture and connecting the design to the public? Absolutely. I would have loved to take you through some of the embassy work, because it's amazing when you start an embassy project, you actually spend a couple weeks in the host country, because you got to meet with everybody on post, but you got to meet with city officials, city agencies. And while you're there, you're constantly walking around, seeing things. You're seeing the crafts, you're seeing the sense of what it's like to be on the street. And it definitely inspires you and makes you think, what is it that I can take, what the team can take from this experience and bring it into the design? And so culture, how you go about reading, how you experience it so that it doesn't become a pastiche is really the dance that you have to work on. But it's something that we think is really important. Understanding also, how do we deal with, the inequality in our public space, which is really become to the forefront, is another area that is critical for us to begin to embrace much more holistically. It's interesting. One of the things that came out of 9/11 on those 16 acres is how people in New York City became much more aware of their built environment. Everybody had an opinion about what should happen on those 16 acres. I remember the Javits Center over there. The whole Javits Center was filled with round tables, and everybody's having workshops and putting Post-its up. It should be this, it should be that. And suddenly we finally caught up with Europe. You can get in a taxi in Spain, in Madrid, and the taxi driver would have an opinion about architecture. Now people in New York have an opinion about their built environment. And it's really exciting. But it can also be really challenging because everybody has an opinion. But how you are able to process that, engage it in a creative, positive way, I think goes back to what I was talking about with Adam Smith. Beginning to empathize with what people are looking for, what are the challenges they're facing, and how we can help provide some support in solving those challenges. Yeah.
So with this, if we don't have any more questions, I start to somehow to conclude the meeting. First of all, I would like to.
Could I ask one more question?
Sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I know this is a misquote to an extent, but earlier in the lecture, you said something along the lines of architecture belongs to those who see it. And I think the last question kind of responded to that as well. And to what degree do you think that they should be involved in that? Like the people who are like local, like I really appreciate the fact that you're including parks in your buildings and, public environment and public space. And I think that's very important. And we should see a lot more of that going forward. But to what extent do you think the community should be involved? And in your projects, have you ever involved the community? Like, do you ever like ask them a question and like surveys, and how does that work? What is the process there?
Absolutely. It's what John was alluding to on Greenport. From day one, we've been working with communities, from a little waterfront park in Greenport all the way. My brother just actually had a community meeting with our project in Sydney via Zoom. But, when we did the East River waterfront Esplanade, we were dealing with multiple community boards, Community Board 3, Community Board 1, 7 different neighborhoods over, a mile and a half of waterfront, and everybody has different desires. CB3 wanted to know, would people be employed from the community to help build the project? Whereas in CB1, they're like, you better not build any tall buildings that are going to block our view of our office space. Absolutely. This is very much a part of our space. And this is something that I think actually should be taught in school, is how do you engage with communities? What are the tools? Like I said, don't show up with a rendering in the first meeting, and don't let a rendering get published in the New York Times before you have a conversation with the community board, because they'll be just pissed off with you. Show up there listening, and it's all about listening, sketching, working the problem, understanding what are all the challenges, and you do your best to address as many of them as possible. And then you go back and you share with them again. And the thing is, at the end of the day, there's no ta-da moment, because they've grown, they've come along on the ride, just like the client. And that's what it's all about. It's about being inclusive. I tell you, I'm saying this is like, it sounds so simple, but it is so different. Like dealing with community boards in San Francisco, I thought New York City was tough. You go to San Francisco, there's some tough community boards here in San Francisco, or down in the Bay Area and stuff. But you know, I deal with community boards in Houston, you know, all over, and you just, that's part of the process. And you know, just listen. That's the first thing you got to do. We got to listen. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. And then I have one other question if you have time. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think we got, what, 7 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, my question was, your project in Africa where you had the panels designed in South Africa in Cape Town, I think it was. Is it, so that's a question I've been talking about in building construction. Is it cheaper to build on site, or is it cheaper to build in shop in your experience? And then also, like, you know, because then there's the transportation costs, et cetera, or does that vary from project to project for you?
You know, that I'm going to make it, give you a simple answer, you know, because you hear a lot of saying, oh, doing it off-site is cheaper. It's not cheaper. The key is in the time and the cost certainty and the predictability. When you manufacture, you think about a manufactured product and they say, well, this costs $9.95. They're not going to come back to you later on and say, oh, well, it's a little harder to make, so you got to pay $10.95. They don't, that's the price. Now, the supply chain issues that we're facing right now, we're seeing 12, 15%. But when it comes to the building, the price is constantly changing. And you know, when it comes to our fees, it's usually based on construction. And the client wants the cheapest price. So that's working against us in terms of our value model. But at the end of the day, we believe the real savings is in time. You gain quality, what were the threes? It's time, cost, and yeah, quality. You gain quality, you lose time. We're looking at, you know, 30 to 50% time reduction. So when you have $100 million project and you have financing that you have to pay, you know, interest on every month, and you cut that job from 3 years into 15 months, you're talking about huge savings. And that's where the savings is. It's not about trying to do it cheaper. That's the problem I have with all the PR out there. We're going to do it cheap. And that's where you end up with a lot of the forced labor issues, because they're looking for suppliers who use labor in an abusive way to keep the prices down. And we've got to move away from that. It's about how we can impact time and also take it out of the dense city fabric and do it in a controlled, safe work environment. Okay.
So we slowly getting to the end of our lecture. So first of all, Chris, thank you so much for your generosity, your time, and sharing with us all the thoughts. I am hoping that this is not the last time when you visit New York Institute of Technology School of Architecture. I hope that it's just the beginning, and that we will meet again with a much larger group of people that we can share opinions, thoughts, and certain methods which are really from the, when thinking of your firm, really from the cutting edge of what's right now in architectural thought. So saying this, I am already inviting you to some crits in our school, and I hope, because we want to show our students certain projects and construction. I'm sorry, I teach building construction, so I would be happy to visit some construction sites. Thank you
Yeah,
so
and
much.
maybe in the future, we could take some of the students out to our Harrison facility in New Jersey, and you can actually sort of see some of those ideas in actuality. Anyway, it was a great pleasure and a great opportunity to be able to share some of what we've been up to over this past 25 years. So everybody take care. And
thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, Wojciech,
Thank you.
and Dustin, for organizing
Thank you
this.
very much. It was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Great
night
work.
to
Bye.
everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you all.